There was a lot of talk during the Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry wide receiver room about the hype and what that wide receiver could be. Well, folks, 2023, there is no hype. And I love every fact of it because this wide receiver room is going to be everything that room is thought to be and more. Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOP, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. We got a name for y'all, the Everydayers. Be more like the Everydayers. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. And the best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, notifications on. So when the content drops, you're all there to absorb it. Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. A little bit of business to take care of before we get to our training camp preview here on the wide receiver position. The Browns have signed cornerback Thacarius Bo-Pete Keys. He is now into the fold. The Browns, one thing we'll always say about the Cleveland Browns is they are never not in on cornerbacks. Another cornerback brought in today. Sadly, 2022 rookie draft choice center, interior offensive lineman Dawson Deaton, if everybody remembers, tore the ACL in training camp last year, so we never really got much of an opportunity to know Dawson Deaton. Dawson Deaton waived with an injury designation. Hopefully it works out for the young man. But as I said, we are here for your training camp preview on the wide receiver position. This room has holdovers. This room has a couple of newcomers who bring an extreme amount of juice to this offense. This room has a couple of young kids that promise should be there for both of these young men. And then we're going to get into everybody else in that wide receiver room. And which couple of guys maybe we'll make a case for as far as making the 2023 Browns roster. It's going to take a lot, though. This room looks like it's stacked. This room looks like it's locked in as who's going to make the roster. Obviously, there's always that asterisk as to why one guy may not make it. We don't like to say the I word, so we won't say it, which could open a door for somebody else here. But you go back to 2022. Now, the two holdovers, your starting wide receivers in 2022, Amari Cooper, 78 receptions, 1,160 yards, 8 touchdowns. First year with Cleveland Browns, coming into what was a really, really difficult situation. Amari, if everybody remembers, Amari was originally brought in via trade from the Dallas Cowboys before the Deshaun Watson talks heated up and ended up in a finality of Deshaun Watson becoming a Cleveland Brown. Amari ends up playing his first 11 games with Jacoby Brissett. And I don't want to say backup quarterback because it seems unfair to label Jacoby Brissett that. I know he's not considered a top 32 NFL quarterback, not necessarily a starter, but certainly has the capabilities. But Amari Cooper gets into a situation, where he comes to this team. It's kind of, who is going to be the quarterback, because it was pretty apparent and obvious that it was not going to be Baker Mayfield. The Browns get the deal done, finalize the deal, get Deshaun Watson in here. Originally, it's a 6-game suspension. Then it's an 11-game suspension. And Amari Cooper, to his credit, good soldier about it, good organizational guy about the situation. Didn't complain about his money. And to be fair, the Browns picked up a contract that the Dallas Cowboys were unwilling to pay. So Amari was getting his money. But he played with, Jacoby Brissett. The relationship started slow. The relationship built up. The relationship had its moments. And just like with Deshaun Watson, though, everything started slow once Deshaun got here. Understandably so, the amount of rust. This team, it had built offensively pretty good chemistry with Jacoby Brissett. But you look at the numbers, 78, 1160. Amari Cooper absolutely, crushed it in his first year with the Cleveland Browns. Could be a little bit different this year as there is a lot more maybe targets up for grabs. But we'll see how that works out because there's going to be a lot more targets in general this year as the Browns transition into a team that's going to throw the ball a little bit more than we've all been accustomed to covering and watching the Cleveland Browns here over the last couple of years. But Amari Cooper still clear cut your number one wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns at this point. Donovan Peoples-Jones, his 2022 season, by far his best statistical season in the league to this point. We're talking about a guy who was a 5-star athlete. Yes, he was a former 6th-round pick, but athletically, Donovan Peoples-Jones tested more like a 2nd-round, possibly even a 1st-round athlete. His time at Michigan didn't do him any favors. Michigan's still not really churning out wide receivers. Mr. Harbaugh up there runs the offense a little bit differently. But Donovan Peoples-Jones has just been a player who's put his nose to the ground and worked on his craft significantly better from year 1 to year 2, significantly better from year 2 to year 3. He's a player. And I think if you would finish the season with Jacoby Brissett last year, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones would have found a way to get to 1,000 yards. We all know that was going to happen. There was no reason for it to happen. But now we get here to year 4 for Donovan Peoples-Jones. And now this is a very, very interesting year for Donovan Peoples-Jones because now this wide receiver room is a lot deeper. Donovan Peoples-Jones obviously going into his free agent, his walk year here, year 4 with the Browns. So the opportunity, for him to still put up good numbers and find a payday, whether it's here with the Cleveland Browns or testing the market. And that's the weird thing about this room. This room, the wide receiver room, the way it's currently constructed, could be a 1, 2, 3 year room. Also has a very feel of it. Maybe it couldn't be. If Donovan has a really good year, maybe he cashes himself and puts himself financially in a market that the Browns are not comfortable with. The other guys behind him, and we'll get to those in segment 2 and segment 3 here. So this room, it's very interesting in the way it's constructed because I think we could talk positively and, with a lot of, purpose and a lot of, forthright into what we know this wide receiver room is going to be in 2023. But going forward, certainly, even in 2024, Amari Cooper, maybe not. There's a lot of I don't want to say uncertainty, but a lot of questions to be answered as far as how this wide receiver room is going to maneuver forward into 2024. But you've got your top 2 here. I know Amari Cooper we will label as your number 1 wide receiver. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think it could be a 2A, 2B situation. Of course, that's going to get into some conversations in segment 2 on a player that I am absolutely stoked that the Browns have brought in. I think this player can bring a world to this offense where the focus will not necessarily always be on Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, or David Njoku. The focus is going to have to be on the Browns' new 3rd-year wide receiver, Elijah Moore. So Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the effort from both players last year, absolutely outstanding. Both players should be on track for big production here in 2023 as Deshaun Watson is going to get his opportunity, full season, a lot more. I don't want to say, choosing of the playbook because I know these things get out there, not necessarily, but more of, hey, here is the full playbook. Let us know what you like the best, what you are most comfortable with, which should leave for an opportunity for the Browns to throw the football, like I said earlier, with a lot more alacrity, a lot more production, a lot more higher passing numbers than we've been accustomed to over the last few seasons. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host here of Locked On Browns. Been here 7th season with Locked On Browns, your Cleveland Browns coverage. Appreciate you all for being along for the ride. Be more like the everydayers. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over, under, or who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Continuing on here to segment 2, Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate all of you for being along for the ride. Again, as always, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Notifications on, and Locked On Browns is available and free always wherever you get your podcast. So we've been discussing the Browns wide receiver position here as we get closer and closer to July 22nd, the Greenbrier in West Virginia, where the Browns 2023 season will officially begin. Now, I mentioned the Browns 2 moves brought in here and just juice brought to this offense. Players probably more suited to quarterback Deshaun Watson. And we're going to start here first. My pen paling, love letter-ish adoration of Elijah Moore. It's just begun. It's only going to grow. I'm starting to see more and more from major analysts within the league, starting to understand just exactly what Elijah Moore can bring to this team, can bring to Deshaun Watson, can bring to Coach Kevin Stefanski, can be a true problem for how defenses are viewing pre-snap motion and all of that stuff. And it's going to make it really, really difficult. But Elijah Moore coming in here, and I've said before, and I will continue to say it again, I love the fact that Elijah Moore is coming in here with a chip on his shoulder. His time in New York obviously did not go well, understandably so. The Zach Wilson experiment has not really worked out. Then you draft Garrett Wilson, and all of a sudden Elijah Moore becomes an afterthought. His position in the offense was given to Wilson, more forced to learn, the other side, the Z's position with the Jets. And it was, for the Jets, it just did not go well, obviously. Now you get the opportunity, and maybe for a quick, faint moment, Elijah Moore thought there was an opportunity. Hey, I'm going to get to hopefully resurrect or restart or even start my career with Aaron Rodgers. And then obviously seeing it in black and white that, Aaron Rodgers is, not coming to be a part of the New York Jets, but not necessarily coming to be a part of the New York Jets that included Elijah Moore. Browns swoop in. You give up second-round pick, number 43 overall. You get Elijah Moore. You slide back to the third round, which they doubled down and drafted another wide receiver, which will feature a little bit in segment 3. But the Browns get a player, and we've already seen it, obviously, in OTAs, jet sweeps. They're having fun with the offense, running some option every now and then. You never really heard that or saw that. Wink, wink, by the way. But Elijah Moore, they're showing that they want to try to use him out of the backfield, or at least give looks of him in the backfield. And if you kind of remember, Donovan Peoples-Jones, home game, Ravens, Donovan Peoples-Jones, little Texas route against Roquan Smith, catches the ball, beats Roquan Smith into the house, touchdown. Now imagine doing that with a much smaller, a much more agile, a much more quicker, a much more faster player in Elijah Moore. It's just things that you can tap into. Elijah Moore, his time at Ole Miss, his production was ridiculous. It was off the charts. He was a fantastic player in his time down in Oxford. So for Elijah Moore now to get this opportunity, and now Elijah Moore is going to the best quarterback he's ever played with. He has never played with a quarterback even close to the level of Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's got a lot to prove. Elijah Moore's got a lot to prove. And guess what? Guess who's working out together right now, about 2 weeks before Browns training camp starts? Yes, Elijah Moore and Deshaun Watson. I think it's a case where the two of them, there might be some mutual respect there, but there also might be hey, Deshaun thinks I need this guy to put my name back on the level it should be on. And Elijah looking at Deshaun Watson and saying, this is the level of guy I should be playing with. This is how good I am. This is how capable I am. This is what I can do. So the heck with whatever happened in New York, I'm starting anew with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I've been on record. I think there's an easy path where Elijah Moore will lead this team in receptions. It's not a knock on Coop. It's not a knock on Donovan Peoples-Jones, but I just think there is going to be so many opportunities for him, whether it's out of the backfield motion, in the backfield motion, out of the backfield, just a little bit more, just to keep the defense on their toes. And okay, here we are 2 seconds before the snap, and all of a sudden, Elijah Moore was in shotgun, standing next to Deshaun Watson. Now he walks up to the line of scrimmage to go in motion, so we got to see which way he's going to go. Quick left, quick right, and guess what? Once he gets outside the tackle box, the tight end box, guess what? Set, go. Now Elijah Moore, one-on-one, hopefully with a safety, hopefully with a player who is not as quick as him. There's going to be opportunities probably where linebackers end up with a bad draw on Elijah Moore, and Elijah Moore is going to win those, 100 out of 100. I think Elijah Moore, and Coop last year had 78 receptions. And I'm not saying, I would say that number is probably maybe the same for what he gives you this year. And that's a fine number. But I think there's just a lot of gimme layup plays where Elijah Moore can get you in 8 receptions. And even maybe for a number like 68, there'll be a week or two where he doesn't break a long one, doesn't break a bunch of tackles. But I think you can pencil in Elijah Moore as leading the Cleveland Browns in receptions in 2023. And I think it's pretty easy. Marquisse Goodwin brought in, obviously, Marquisse Goodwin of the same representation as Deshaun Watson in, obviously, of course, same agency. David Mulligetta, of course, is the name. I was stumbling all over there. But Marquisse Goodwin represented, obviously, a longtime veteran in this league. And Marquisse has never been a blow it out the park as far as numbers type of wide receiver. But he's the guy where the speed will always be honored. We have noticed this in OTAs. He's getting open deep. Most important thing for him is his legs, and it looks like his legs are good. When his legs are good, he's a force. He's an issue. And now when you're worried about Amari Cooper, you're worried about Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, any one of these guys, and there's a player like Marquisse Goodwin on the field, and you're going to flood it with a 9 route, somebody's got to be responsible for that. And most likely there is not one guy that can cover Marquisse Goodwin one-on-one when it comes to him just running a fly route. There's not a guy. So you got to put some safety attention over there, which leads to what I'm talking about earlier. Elijah Moore, work in the middle. Well, if Marquisse Goodwin went deep, took coverage with him, you always got to have a second set of eyes on a guy like Amari Cooper. There are people then who are going to be able to deal with Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is going to need most likely number 1 cornerback attention. These defenses are not going to be able to put that attention on him. So the opportunity for Elijah Moore should be huge. But Marquisse Goodwin, and look, there's a path where Marquisse Goodwin could not make the Browns opening day roster. There's kids, some of the names of the guys, struggling around in the bottom of the roster. Some of these guys maybe bring some return ability. Marquisse Goodwin is here for now, and I think he could be a true nice piece for this team, a small, nice piece for this team. But there's not a guarantee, in my opinion, that Marquisse Goodwin will be a part of the Browns roster in 2023. I would say there's 6 guys I'm pretty sure of. Of those 6, Marquisse Goodwin would be the biggest guy I would say I'm not so sure on, just because there is a lot of younger depth. Some guys bring a little bit something that maybe they can do that a guy like Marquisse Goodwin cannot do at this point of his career. But Marquisse Goodwin, this is a nice guy to have when you're talking about maybe your fringe 6th, 7th wide receiver going into opening day. Not a lot of guys in that situation can show the production, that he's been part of winning teams like Marquisse Goodwin has, and have the calling card of sub 4.3 40 speed. So it's a really, really nice guy to get on the roster. And if the Browns see something where it works out that Marquisse Goodwin does not end up being a part of the finality of the final 53-man roster, that obviously speaks pretty well about anybody who may have beat him out. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host of Locked On Browns. We're going to get to segment 3 here. Talk a little bit about the kids. We're going to talk about a little bit about everybody else trying to hang on, cling on, find a way to be a part of this Browns 2023 roster. Thanks, everybody, so long for being along for the ride. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. Of course, 3rd season of Cleveland Browns coverage here with Locked On Browns, the 7th season here. Segment 3 is where we are at here. We sound a little nervous. We are a little nervous. Had some computer issues here today. Had to run through a bunch of work to get everything back. But as always, appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. The Everydayers, we love you to death. Join the Everydayers. Best way to do that is subscribe to the YouTube channel. Notifications on. And audio-wise, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, we get into segment 3 here. And now, look, we've talked about Coop, we've talked about DPJ, we've talked about Elijah Moore, we've talked about Marquisse Goodwin. The Browns still have 2 more wide receivers on this roster, one going into year 2. The other one is a rookie. And both of these players were former top 100 picks to the wide receiver position. We'll start with David Bell. First things first. If I told you David Bell had more receptions as a rookie than Donovan Peoples-Jones, A, would you believe me? Or B, would that maybe change the way some of you feel about a possible growth path for David Bell in year 2? I know the spots are tricky. There's not going to be a lot of opportunities for some of these guys in the bottom end of that room. But David Bell did have 24 receptions for the Cleveland Browns last year. Kevin Stefanski fell in love with him at Purdue. I'll be honest with you, when I went and double-checked, I was surprised that David Bell had 24 receptions in the 2022 season. So David Bell, all these guys have a little something they bring that maybe the others don't. David Bell is a chain mover. If it's 3rd and 7, David Bell's going to get you 8. If it's 4th and 4, David Bell's going to get you 5. And again, when you have names like Cooper, Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, look, there'd be opportunities, and I say it jokingly, where if I went out there and I was the 5th option, there might be opportunities where I was open. So when you have a guy the ilk of David Bell who found a way for 24 receptions as a rookie, granted, not a lot in a high, obviously yards per catch, but David Bell found a way to contribute as a rookie. I think David Bell here in year 2, getting to play with a Deshaun Watson, there will be opportunities and he will be successful in said opportunities. Now the Browns, after obviously again the Elijah Moore trade, Browns traded their 2nd round pick. Browns got Elijah Moore. The Browns also got the Jets' 3rd round pick, what the Browns in turn used to draft Cedric Tillman from the University of Tennessee. Cedric Tillman, again, now what does he bring that nobody? Cedric Tillman is already the biggest wide receiver in the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room. Nobody else. That's it. So he does have a calling card that other guys in that room do not have. He's a good run blocker. And as we've known in the past during the Kevin Stefanski regime, as a wide receiver, it's not an ask. It's not a hope. It's a requirement. You got to block. If you don't gonna block, then I will find other wide receivers to put on the field. And then when we call passing plays, we're going to throw to those guys who are willing to block. So that's a good thing right off the bat for Cedric Tillman, and I think a way that he can find some playing time. Cedric Tillman, his tape was good at Tennessee. I've had some friends message me. They were maybe a little bit higher than Cedric Tillman than Jalen Hyatt. I'm not going to quibble on either one of that. But for Cedric Tillman coming in here, and it could be a slow path as a rookie. If everybody stays healthy, the opportunities to get Cedric on the field might make it a little bit difficult because you're going to have to take some guys off who have already been proven. But there's probably a lot of faith right now in Cedric Tillman, and I can understand why. You got to think he's going to be a candidate to play some special teams. If you're willing to be a solid run blocker as a wide receiver, you have to think that there's abilities there for you to succeed as a special teamer. Now you get to the rest of this wide receiver room, and there's a lot of names here. Jakeem Grant. And now for Jakeem Grant, you feel bad because I think the Browns truly had a role in mind for him last year until the Achilles obviously failed him in training camp. Gadget player, just a player that you try to get in space, get the ball in his hands, return ability. But we saw obviously Donovan Peoples-Jones did that last year. Elijah Moore can do that. There's other guys who can do that. Jalen Darden is another one who could find a way to contribute to this team as a return man as well. So there's opportunities there for he and Jakeem Grant. Jakeem Grant, it could end up where he's not going to be here. And I think most likely he's not going to be here because I just think there's too many guys in front of him. And there's guys who may be good enough, young enough, show enough promise that the Browns are going to want to take the gamble on said young player as opposed to letting said young player walk. Now, I talked about a guy like Marquisse Goodwin. Now, Marquisse Goodwin and what he's been in the NFL, ideally, and I'm not going to go long on this because I know everybody's going to crucify me, but ideally, the NFL type of career you would expect or hope for from one Anthony Schwartz would be similar to Marquisse Goodwin. Both track athletes, extremely fast guys, guys that you're going to put in, difficult situations, where there's a linebacker or a safety hovering down on him in a tight window and expect them to hold on to the ball. But maybe Anthony Schwartz in this offense this year with a lot more playmakers around him, maybe things slow down. Maybe Anthony gets a little more comfortable. I've always felt, bad about the way things have been and gone so far with Anthony Schwartz. I'd love to see Anthony find some success. And, I kind of understand that deep down in my heart, most likely if Anthony Schwartz is going to find success, it's going to be somewhere outside of Cleveland. But Anthony Schwartz always certainly somebody, that I'll pull for. Michael Woods, difficult situation. Obviously was training with Deshaun Watson. His season is already over for Michael Woods, so you hate to see that. But for Michael Woods, it might not be the worst situation in the world. As I said, we don't know where the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room stands for 2024. We know where it stands for 2023. And to be honest, in 2023, Michael Woods may not have an opportunity. So maybe get healthy, get right, get further progressed into the system for more comfortable, more acclimated. Maybe there's a better, opportunity for Michael Woods to make the Cleveland Browns in 2024. We still have Michael Harley. There was times, obviously, we've seen some things and some OTAs, some training camp practices, but a really, really long road for a player like Michael Harley. Rashawn Henry, if anybody doesn't know, there's a player that's here. But now we're getting to the deep of the deep of the deep. Dalen Baldwin, if anybody remembers, Dalen Baldwin, a couple of big receptions in that Raven game last year at home about a week before Christmas, but the Browns won. But I think a player like Cedric Tillman comes in similar size, better athlete, better production, younger, significantly younger. So that makes a tough path for a player like Dalen Baldwin. So, I mean, if you wanted to tell me there was a crazy world where a perfect summer for Anthony Schwartz panned out and maybe they moved on from Marquisse Goodwin, or if you wanted to tell me that, you weren't sure about the return abilities and you needed to use Jalen Darden there, even though we haven't seen him do it as a Cleveland Brown just to this point, or Jakeem Grant shows up, shows out, and everything's right. And, that injury that he had doesn't show the significance that we think it might show for a player of his age. So maybe for Jakeem Grant, but then, the rest of the guys, obviously you get to the point where you see it's a really, really difficult, hill to climb as far as making this 2023 Browns 53-man roster. You have Amari Cooper set in stone. You are number one. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, 2A, 2B, whoever you want to do it. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to have another solid year, which will lead to a good contract if it's in Cleveland. Maybe if it's not in Cleveland, we'll see. But Elijah Moore, I will continue. I'm going to have to pay the piper if this doesn't pan out. But Elijah Moore will lead the Cleveland Browns in receptions in 2023. Marquisse Goodwin could have an impact. Marquisse Goodwin could also find a where maybe he's the odd man out, as there's not a chair for him in the Browns wide receiver room in 2023. David Bell, again, 24 receptions, more receptions as a rookie than Donovan Peoples-Jones. So just keep that in mind when anybody's ready to throw David Bell on the curb, like he's a leftover keg after 4th of July party. Keep that in mind. Cedric Tillman, the Browns had already made the move for Elijah Moore. They had already made the moves for the other wide receivers in that room. So obviously the Browns think highly of Cedric Tillman, and he's going to get an opportunity, in my opinion, to show the Browns that they were right in the drafting of said Cedric Tillman. I am Jeff Lloyd, host here of Locked On Browns. Again, 7th season Cleveland Browns coverage here with Locked On Browns. Absolutely, I love every single minute of it. Love the fact that I get so many people who make Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Join the everydayers. Subscribe to Locked On Browns on YouTube. Put your notifications on so when the content drops, you're all ready to absorb it. We are always available. We are always free wherever you get your podcast. Keep trucking along here this week. Got more preview episodes coming. Did the running back episode. Of course, we did the tight end episodes. I haven't gotten eyes on those yet. Get your eyes on them now. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.